This is Brandon Darby with Breitbart News. I'm sitting with someone I consider a friend, a man I respect a lot.
And I'm your sponsor in not smoking.
And my sponsor in not smoking, Seb Gorka.
Hey, buddy.
Who needs no further introduction. I think our readers and our viewers know a lot about Seb. As you may know, I cover border and cartels for Breitbart, and I manage the project. Seb is an expert at terrorism. We have pushed for certain factions of certain cartels to be designated as foreign terrorist organizations. You know, some on the right who are in the know are pushing for that. Some are really pushing for more to be designated. And a lot of folks on the right, and I think Seb is of that ilk, think that there are other ways to handle them besides designating them as foreign terror orgs. But regardless of the differences, how big of a deal is it that that is what we're talking about? That we have the President of the United States talking about going after Mexican cartels, and that the right is now taking up this messaging and taking up this issue as one of their core issues. How big of a deal is that?
So I think that's what we have to recognize first. The significance of that being the topic is huge after decades of us not grappling with this issue. Before we go a little bit deeper, I have to say, Brandon, if people are just catching this on the fly or something, you need to know who this man is. This man has done more than practically any other news agency to actually get the truth from the ground about the border. This man needs recognition. So God bless you, Brandon.
Thank you, Seb. I appreciate that a lot. And, you know, we're here at this event at Turning Point USA, and it was just kind of an impromptu thing. We said, hey, how do you feel about this? Let's talk about it. Because right now we are in a situation where the people on the right who know about this issue really are divided. You know, like I said, you have, I want Los Zetas and the Reynosa faction of the Gulf Cartel designated as foreign terror orgs. A lot of folks on the right don't want that, but they want something else done. Some folks want all the cartels, which I think is absurd, crazy. It would just devastate. And so there's all kinds of differences right now, but I think the key thing to remember is that for the first time, we have the issue of Mexican cartels being talked about by significant people like Seb Gorka on the right, and by significant people with connections to the administration like Seb Gorka, and by the President of the United States himself.
All right, so I have a certain take on why I don't think using the FTO designation liberally is a good idea, and I don't want to switch people off here, but it really has to do with taxonomy, with being accurate. I'm a conservative. I grew up under Margaret Thatcher. I looked at Ronald Reagan as a hero. For me, truth is where everything begins. And if you've got a very serious problem, and this is a massive one, 72,000 people dead of drug overdoses last year, that's 20,000 more than died in the Vietnam War. That's in 1 year. When you have a problem of that magnitude, you better get the diagnosis right. If you've got a sucking chest wound, if you've been shot in the thorax and you give the guy an aspirin, he's not going to last too long. So you've got to diagnose the problem. And for me, I spent 2 decades in the counterterrorism field. I dabbled in these issues to begin with in the British military reserves, in an intelligence unit, and then I spent years and years working with the Defense Department, Fort Bragg. I traveled the country after 9/11 teaching the ideology of Al-Qaeda, of ISIS, to help our operators understand how you defeat the bad guys. And for me, every lesson, it doesn't matter whether it was an FBI field office in San Antonio, whether it was the guys across the fence in Bragg, I studied it the same way. Call me professorial. I said, okay, what is terrorism? If you want to be able to deal with it, you have to know what it is. And terrorism is not the same as the Cosa Nostra. Terrorism is not the same as a serial killer. Terrorism is a very special kind of political violence. Political violence. Terrorism is about intimidation. And terrorism, whether you're the IRA, a bunch of Catholic extremists, whether you're Al-Qaeda or ISIS, must have one commonality, whether it's done by Marxist members of the Rote Armee faction in Germany in the 1970s, or whether it's Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi beheading American citizens. Doesn't matter whether they're religious or secular or whatever. The commonality is the group must have a political end state they wish to achieve. Whether it's creating world communism, whether it's creating the caliphate, it has to be an ideologically defined end state. If it's just about making money, they're not terrorists. And you have to have different tools, because different tools come into play. You don't deploy the same kind of tools to treat cancer as you use to treat the flu. Therefore, the diagnosis is crucial. Now, for me, the threshold is very simple. FTO designation is one of the most powerful things the federal government can do, because when you designate a foreign entity as a terrorist organization, a whole Pandora's box of tools opens up at Treasury, at DOD, inside the intelligence community to whack those bastards. So you better be defining that organization as a terrorist organization, because it is. So for me, the threshold is very simple. Does that group have political end states it wishes to achieve? Whether it's religiously fueled like a jihadi, whether it's communist, fascist, whatever it is their end state more than just making money or killing a lot of people like Ted Bundy? Now, in the case of Mexico, and this is where I think we're going to be able to find some common bridges. You're the expert. I deal in jihadi terrorism mostly. I think, especially along the border area, there are cartels that swim in politics. They want to control a political area, not just a smuggling route. Do they want to become the president of Mexico? I'm not so sure. If they did, easy, that's an FTO. If they want to kill people and kneecap them and become the government, that's terrorism. If they are locally concentrated in their political ambitions, I often find that that's only because they wish to make more money. They want to buy the mayor in Juarez off. Why? So that they can smuggle more stuff under the nose of the local administration. So for me, the question is, how much politics is the cartel mixing into their strategic objectives? And at some point, they may flip. I haven't seen too much of that yet, but at the end of the day, you nailed it. The fact that we are talking about this, that's historic.
Do you think, just strategically, the fact that you have representatives like Chip Roy introducing legislation, which I think is not broad, it's very specific, it's not even about the Gulf Cartel and Los Zetas, it's about two specific factions, right? The two most heinous groups who we would argue have crossed that line into politics, right, and using sheer terror and violence. But Chip Roy introducing that, does that then pave the way and make it seem a lot more reasonable for people to take lesser actions, but still very strong actions that would not have taken place otherwise?
Yeah, I mean, who is it? I think it's Glenn Beck that popularized the concept of the Overton Window. When that kind of legislation or approach is recommended by somebody who has a constituency, you're broadening the aperture of the Overton Window. So absolutely, and it's very significant because, look, this is one of the issues that got the president elected: immigration reform, the wall, the border. So this is important to him. And it's become a political football for the last 3 years, because we can play I do it on my radio show, America First. I can play the video clips of Schumer 6 years ago saying, we've got to fix this, we've got to have physical barriers. I mean, the Democrats were on board. And now, because Donald Trump is the president, suddenly, we don't want to fix the border. We need to get back to that place where it's depoliticized. And the thing that really makes me excited about having this debate at all is talking about the cartels. Because I don't care who you are. I don't care who you voted for, whether you voted for Hillary, whether you were a Bernie bro. If we don't fix this border issue, wall, census, legal reform, if we don't fix it, what happens? Every single day, those organizations are making billions of dollars. Every single day. Women, children are being trafficked, are being raped, are being abused every single day. Weapons and drugs are being marched across the border. So this is the time to get serious on how we handle the cartels, whether it's FTO designation or something else. We have to stop the suffering. It's national security and it's humanitarian. And I've got to tell you, brother, the most glorious thing that I realized as soon as I met Donald Trump is the summer of 2015, when he asked me to help advise him on national security issues in the campaign. This man has no sacred cows. He's not a politician, never served in public office, first president since Washington to Obama who wasn't a former senator, congressman, or a general, which means he comes to the swamp, and I've seen him angry. And the easiest way to make him angry is when a general or a deputy assistant secretary walks up on some big issue, ISIS, cartels, blah, 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 and says, this is how we're fixing the problem. And the commander-in-chief says, why? Why are we doing it this way? And the swamp reaction is always, well, Mr. President, because that's how we've been doing it for 27 years. And his response is, so what? I don't care. We could have been doing the worst thing for 27 years. There's no sacred cows. So right now, we're in a really exciting place where we can tear down bad conventional wisdoms, discuss really provocative ideas like FTO designation for cartels. If we have no sacred cows, together, all of the sides on the right have a greater chance of solving the problem. And that's why I think we'll find some commonality.
Yeah, so one of the problems that we face, and a lot of the people we work with in Mexico face, is they put a lot of the blame on the U.S. State Department. And not that there aren't great people in the State Department, not that there aren't dedicated foreign service workers, but there does seem to be an agenda, right? And they mean well, but they're moving ahead on this long-term agenda. And moving ahead on the long-term agenda, if little bumps in the road get in the way, say that there's a politician connected to certain cartels, but that politician is vital to continue with this trade
bilateral
agenda.
Relations, right.
So if that politician wants them to leave a certain cartel boss alone, all of a sudden there's no resources to go after that cartel boss. So that type of swamp in the State Department, that bureaucracy, that some would say deep state, if you will, but what can be done about that? Like, what can be done to stop that from happening?
You're so diplomatic. And
I'm very diplomatic.
So polite.
Yeah.
State Department is a disaster.
Yeah.
It's been an increasingly problematic disaster for about 50 years. And yeah, there are some great guys. But even amongst the great guys, the majority of the State Department, I know them well, I've had good buddies who are senior Foreign Service officers. The majority of the State Department is predicated, the institution has a culture, and the culture is always, how can we better get along with the other government? Which sounds nice, right? How can we better get along? My boss, President Trump, starts at a different position. He says, what is going to be best for America? That's what America First means. And for some reason in the last 30, 40 years, that became controversial. But it doesn't matter whether you're the Prime Minister of Canada, whether you're, the President of America, whether you're the King of, Belgium. That's what you should be doing. Your interests, in as much as you can collaborate with others, should always be predicated on what is best for my people. And the State Department is not shaped by that. They don't want to ruffle feathers. And this phrase, going native, they go native. By the end of the day, a couple of tours in a certain capital, a couple of tours in a certain region, and you meet well-meaning people who think, it's the interests of Mexico, because Mexico's a victim, Mexico's poor. It's the interests of Afghanistan. And that's not why you pick up a government paycheck. That's not why you are serving in the foreign policy elite of the federal government. You are there to represent one thing alone, the interests of the American people. So that's why, in many cases, the State Department is more of a problem than it is part of the solution. I mean, Operation Merida was just throwing billions of dollars into a Mexican capacity that didn't exist, and in many cases was funding the problem. The deep state is real. I saw it when I was in the White House. It's analogous to how you deal with the cartels, how you would deal with them. The deep state's everywhere. I saw it in the White House. I saw it in the State Department, FBI, intelligence community. We have a coterie of people who think they know better than the president because, oh, I've been in government for 25 years. Presidents come and go, I know better. People who've never been elected, like, Lieutenant Colonel, don't call me Mr., Vindman, who think, think about this, a colonel, a half-bird colonel, who in front of Congress in sworn testimony said, I heard the contents of this phone call and I was disturbed and I thought I need to protect, quote, the interagency consensus from the president. Now, I don't know about you, Brandon. I'm now a proud American citizen. When I went into that voting booth on November 8th, 2016, I didn't see three boxes. Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, interagency consensus. I didn't vote for Colonel Vindman's interpretation of the interagency consensus. I voted for a man who's going to be the commander-in-chief who defines foreign policy. That's the deep state. So how do you deal with it? I gave advice of this nature to certain individuals in the administration who didn't heed it and then were attacked and taken down. Every administration element, whether it's the State Department or elsewhere, you go in and you have a couple of public executions. And media matters, I mean rhetorical, okay? Don't get your knickers in a twist. You get the two most heinous examples of individuals who think that they can counter the will of 63 million American people, and you fire them. You say, you don't represent what happened in the election, and you have a very public removal of those senior individuals, which then sends what? A message to the whole organization. New sheriffs in town, and if you're going to try and subvert us, this is what's going to happen to you. People's behavior, bureaucrats are fundamentally not brave people, and you can change institutional cultures with a bit of leadership at the beginning. Too many places we didn't do that, and I think that translates to the cartels. We may come to a compromise where we pick the 2-3 most heinous ones that have a little bit of a political end game, and we destroy them with FTO or similar designation. So the other cartels go,
we're not going to cross that line.
I better get into horse racing or something, right?
Now here's one final question before we go, and it's something you said brought it up. Do you think just the sheer level of depravity represented in how this impeachment, the articles of impeachment came down, do you think that little bit of President Trump that was wanting to appease or to get along, do you think that things like when it comes to border security, when it comes to dealing with Mexican cartels, do you think that's gone now?
That's a great question. I haven't seen him since the Christmas party 2 weeks ago in the White House. I'd love to ask him if I see him the next time. Let me give you the answer of what I saw when I worked with him in the White House. For a man who loves this country, who's taken the barbs, the slings and arrows, his family, his children, the remarkable thing about him, and look, he wrote the book, The Art of the Deal, is however vicious you are, however selfish you are, this man has it's like grace. He has an incredible capacity to say, I'd still like to be able to make some kind of deal with you in the interests of America. So he even when Pelosi calls him a criminal, he'll invite her to the White House to discuss, okay, how can we move forward on USMCA? So there's this remarkable capacity inside him not to bear spite, not to take a grudge. Is there a limit to that grace? He's a better man than I, because they called me every name under the sun. They attacked my wife, they attacked my dead mother, they attacked my teenage son when I was in the White House. So I've been through the mill, but he's been through the mill a million times more. The fact that he's still as gracious as he is, forget the tweets. I'm not talking about the tweets, I'm talking about wanting to work together for the sake of America is remarkable. Is there a point at which where he says, screw you? There would be for me.
Seb, thank you.
Thank you, buddy. Keep doing what you do.